decided to name the stream discussing, well, this particular stream, so that, today we're like discussing about games that can happen, and such, and games that basically that we used to. So there's that. Right, so apparently the one thing that's mostly on everyone's mind, at the moment, is Outbreak. Now, Outbreak was launched at the wrong time, of the PS era, so if Outbreak was launched, say, on the PS3, for example, the online would have been better. So, with the online being better in the PS3 era, it would have been more successful, and more people would have been playing it, online, and would have got more into the game. So that would have been one. That probably would have made more sequels later down the line. The AI would have been better, as it went along.
Damn it.
Would have got better each time. So they would eventually made an Outbreak 3. They would have had more, stuff linked to Outbreak, well, actually having, more of, maybe making a TV show, making a movie out of it, which I reckon probably would have done a lot better, than the films that basically came out. For example, the Anderson films, not so much. The first one was okay, but didn't really stay true to the games. The first one, for example, it was okay for an origin, but it didn't really have a connection. As for the Welcome to Raccoon City, no. That, even though it had the game's connection, it didn't really work that well, due to a number of issues, since it was a bad decision, since Paulus actually was working with, with the, Joanna's Roberts, so apparently what would have happened if they didn't, go with those two developers? Well, for one, they probably would have picked someone better, someone that knew what they were doing, most likely, and it would have made a better movie out of it. Now, Outbreak would have been perfect, I think, above all. So it also probably would have got a connection to the mainline games, to do with the Outbreak characters. They would have got, more connection, with Kevin having more of a story to Leon in a way. It would have worked, possibly would have worked better, as Kevin would have actually took over the role, well, apart from basically Leon, in other words, meaning he would have took over, eventually when Leon's thing was just completely pointless. So it would have changed. If only they'd stuck down that route completely. Then it hopefully would have been better. It probably would have been like an open world Outbreak game. It probably would have made it to other consoles and such. Other games probably would have become a bit more of a masterpiece, I think. Now, going off topic from the Outbreak games, now, what would have basically been great if they decided on remakes, the ones that haven't been done yet? Well, for one, Gun Survivors would work, I think, as a remake, in a way. It would work great, I think, depending on the approach that they take. So if they decided to do it in a way that works, then yeah. Now, the first Survivors, I think the story could do better. I think, most of all, with Ark. Ark is actually a good character, but I think he could do a bit more story, I think. So that's when I think of that. Plus a remake probably would have made it a bit better, with the character. Now, to do with the, Gun Survivors 2, I definitely think Gun Survivors 2 would work, since it's a connection to the Outbreak games. Well, Code Veronica, now, Gun Survivors 2 definitely has a connection to Code Veronica, since Code Veronica is, perfect, as a connection, even though they did Code Veronica, now, when you basically look at, the monster in Gun Survivors 2, it's perfect. Because Nemesis actually is more of a threat than the Tyrant in Code Veronica. He's a stalker. He doesn't stop, no matter what, even with the countdown. Like, as soon as the countdown reaches 0, you're screwed. Because no matter how many times you would try to pinpoint Nemesis down, he does not stop at all. Which is actually great. Now, if they did a remake of Code Veronica, Nemesis would be perfect. He would be perfect for chasing Chris Redfield, since Wesker would be behind that, of actually getting a second Nemesis to chase after Chris, in other words. So it would be perfect. Since Nemesis is known to chase after STARS members, and Chris, on the other hand, actually is a STARS member. So it would work a lot. Now, the focus on Nemesis is he wouldn't be focused on Claire at all, even Steve, as his main focus would be by Wesker. So Wesker would be pinpointing Nemesis against Chris Redfield. So there's that. Now, the other thing I'm basically going to suggest is, even though Tyrant in Code Veronica was pretty much bad, in a way, pretty much bad to this point. Now, I think the only way we could make him better. Now, I think the only way they could make him better, I think, Tyrant, is giving him more of development, I think. Making him more of a threat in the game. So that he chases Claire and Steve throughout the entire Rockfort Island, does not stop whatsoever. Now, I think Ashford doing that from the very start would make more sense, because he basically, because first of all, he would know that Claire is on the island or whatever, so first of all, he would think that she's attacked the island, which she hasn't, so the next thing that could happen is, clearly enough, yeah, so he would find out she basically did, basically would think that she attacked the island, she did not, so in a way, she, well, she tries basically to find out what's what, but comes across Tyrant early, which I think would work, which would really work, since he would be more of a threat. He would chase out Rockfort Island, cause a lot of boss fights, in a way, so that would be perfect, for the monster, because he wasn't really a chasing sort in Code Veronica, so changing that would make him more of a threat. So that would work. So moving on to what else would work, in a way, so fights between Nemesis and a couple of monsters could work. Now, for example, even though Tyrant would be chasing Claire and Chris, he could like survive to a certain point in game. So now the other thing is, I think Hunk could basically have a part in it. I think. Now Hunk possibly would leave after, well, after they've left. So after Claire and Steve get rid of Tyrant, now Tyrant would be smart because even though Tyrant would actually be knocked off the plane, he would end up somewhere else. Mainly, he'd end up with a fight against Hank himself, because Hank was in Rockfort Island, possibly at the same time as them, but off screen. So that would work. So the only point is, that would mean Tyrant wouldn't really show up after Claire and that after that, so it would mainly just hunt down Hunk instead, again, which would work, since Hunk would have more of a connection then, after that, so there's that. So then, as it progresses into the Atlantic base, we get more fights. As we know, the Bandersnatch should only be just be boss fights, I think. The Bandersnatch, since the Bandersnatch would work as one of the bosses, and it would work so well. Now, so apparently when they get to the Atlantic base, we know Nemesis would hike a ride on Chris's jet, so that would work. So yeah, that would work so well, since Nemesis would be more of a threat to Chris Redfield in the game. So he would be constantly still chasing him, even though there'll be boss fights of other bosses, like the spider boss fight, and such. Now, they cannot leave that out of the game, as it works so well, and it would lead later down the line to possible other boss fights, but it probably would change a bit of the aspect of the story. So, as you go down the line, well, later down the line, at one point, now I think what would be great is Steve becomes a chaser himself, a stalker. Now this would be way before Alexia, I think. So Steve would be constantly chasing Claire, which again would work, in a way. So that would work so well. Let me put one health in. Yeah, so, right, so the next thing that would happen is, eventually at one point, even though Alexia would be watching the whole thing, eventually Steve intends to snap out of it, snap out of this mind control thing, well, this, temptation of the virus, he would snap out of it, he would basically gain control, of what he's doing. So the next thing that would happen is, he would...
Oh no.
Yeah, so the next thing that would happen is he would actually, fight against whoever's trying to kill Claire. So, in a way, someone comes in there, to fight off, like, and it could be Nemesis. Like, say for example, Nemesis comes in, apparently, while chasing Chris, on the other hand, actually it could work. So, they, interrupt the fight, so Steve actually doesn't get hurt, whatsoever, which would work. So they are, basically confused on what's going on at the time, and then Chris would tell Claire, got this monster chasing him, known as Nemesis, and then Claire, on the other hand, would respond to Chris and like, I've heard that name before, but I can't remember where from. So she would, basically think to Jill, because Jill basically knew Nemesis, because she heard that, Chris once talked about it before, that because Jill was chased by, none other than Nemesis, and would be shocked by it. So, she then basically also, starts questioning it, because it would be so odd, to them. So, there's that, so, next thing is she, even though she basically does start thinking of the monster Nemesis, she basically thinks, how can this monster survive? And Chris would tell her that Wesker sent it after him, which is the 2.0 Nemesis. So the difference in that Nemesis would be, it would not be wearing the trench coat, it would be wearing, well, it's massive overall. Well, it'd be wearing, it'd be like half naked, so, it would have tentacles all over its body, that sort, and they would start questioning it, thinking, why doesn't it mutate? And then Chris basically would tell Claire that Wesker has worked on it to perfection so that it doesn't mutate, since the first one was a failure. Because we all know it was a failure, due to mutating. So apparently that's what would happen. So apparently that's what would happen at this point. So apparently we're pretty much near the end. Now, there's possible other ways, I think, like, if Chris didn't counter, against, well, as we know it, wouldn't counter a Nemesis across Claire, might have been Hunk, I think. Now I think Hunk could possibly, end up crossing paths with Claire, I think, which would work. That would definitely work so well. Now, if that happens, that would mean Hunk would have a story plot. If it happened. So, Tyrant would pretty much be around during that part because Tyrant would have had to ride on Hunk's jet at the time. So the next thing that would happen is something like that. They would attend, well, pretty much if Hunk was the one that crossed Steve's path, whatever, stopping him from getting hurt by a tentacle or whatever, like stabbed or whatever, I think that way it could work. So that way would definitely work so well. So if only it could work like that, so then it would actually be better. Now, as I've mentioned before, certain things would take place in a way, so for certain events to take place. Now Alexia actually would have this conversation with Chris, but Nemesis would be probably there also. Now, I think the way that could work is, even though Wesker's ordered Nemesis to go after Alexia, and Chris is already in that room, now, the thing I see happening is Alexia would actually take control of Nemesis and turn the monster against Wesker. Now, Wesker would be so shocked to find out that his own creation is turned against him, and it would start hunting him down. So, then we basically would have control of Wesker, with a couple of boss fights with Nemesis, so it would take over that role. So then, until he's actually defeated Nemesis, and then suddenly when he has defeated Nemesis, then it would switch back to Alexia. Now, at some point, Alexia would change into what we know as her first form, and she would start chasing pretty much all of them. Now, as for Tyrant, Hunk actually, again, as I mentioned before, Hunk would actually kill Tyrant. So so he would not cross paths with the others, would not actually try to kill them. So Alexia would be a big, massive threat, and Steve would still try to kill Alexia, as his mutant form, mutation. So the next thing he would pretty much do is, he would keep trying, pretty much. So at one point during the chasing of Alexia, he would actually fight in a boss fight with Alexia, so you'd basically take control of Steve at the time, so he would be fighting Alexia during those boss fights. And then the next thing is Steve would get hurt. He would get hurt during the fight, which would have Claire go absolutely crazy and start blasting the shit out of Alexia. And as for Chris, again, he would also be shocked by this, seeing his sister shoot the shit out of Alexia, but hurting Steve. And it would not stop, apparently. And Claire would keep repeating over and over to Steve that she'll save his life, no matter what. So it'd be kind of like a big twist from like the games in a way. So it'd be like a change. So Steve would think that he's going to die. Because that he's bleeding, but turns out they end up saving his life. So Hung actually sees this and he points a gun at Steve because he knows it's a problem. And then Claire and Chris turn around to Hung and say, no, we can fix this. And then Claire basically looks at Hung and says, what if it could be done? What if Steve can bond with the virus? Like Jill did with the Nemesis virus. And then Hung looks down and thinks about it. Thinks that it could be possible for Steve to bond with the virus, but he also thinks it could be too late. At that point, but Claire reassures him anything is possible. Then Chris turns to Claire and says, I know somebody that could help Steve. And then Claire would turn around to Chris and say, really? Who? And then Chris would say to Claire, Rebecca Chambers. She's good with medics and she's also a herb specialist now. She's great with this sort of thing. She's an expert. So in a way she would be an expert, which would work. So in a way it definitely would work, as we know, because the end would be a bit different. Claire would agree. So apparently Claire would agree to the terms of bringing the one to that. So, even though they would agree to that terms, Hunk would tell them that he has a ride on its way, coming to pick him up, and it turns out his ride would be none other than Ada, which would work. Now, Ada is known to be a generous person, so I think with Ada picking up Hunk, it could work during that time. So, yeah, so apparently there's that. So the next thing that could happen is, ow! Yeah, so the next thing that could happen is, Ada would actually help out with carrying, Steve, mutated Steve, aboard the helicopter, so, which, again, would work, in a way. So, the next thing they do is, they basically, actually, even though they actually kill Alexia, yada yada, a lot of other things happen as well. So apparently they do actually manage to escape. Steve, on the other hand, doesn't get captured by Wesker. He ends up in a tube, monitored by none other than Rebecca Chambers. So apparently it does get monitored by Rebecca Chambers in a way. Claire walks in one day and asks how Steve's doing. Claire says he's stabilizing. Stabilizing to the virus. He's starting to bond with the virus. So, months and months have passed since then, and Claire doesn't leave Steve's side at all, which works. So, as things go on, he opens his eyes because he'd been asleep, bonding with the virus for many months and whatever, so eventually they let him out of his tube, and he starts having nightmares of what happened on Rockford Island, about him losing control and hurting Claire, but he looks up at Claire and Claire reassures him it's all right now, it's fine, and Steve basically wonders how he's ended up back in his human state, and Claire tells him that he's managed to bond with the virus, so that's why he has his human form back, but Steve is confused by it, and then Rebecca tells Steve that he's somehow acquired powers because of his bonding. He's managed to control fire because of that, because he's connected to the T-Veronica virus, so now he can control fire without actually mutating at all. which he's shocked by. So the next thing is they have this bonding thing. So Steve would actually approach Claire, basically saying about her rescuing him or whatever, and about it being a good thing that Wesker didn't take him at all, which he's happy about. So they get happy about it, apparently, and then the last bit of the credits, they share romance with each other, which works. So with them sharing it, they end up so it was pretty much a good thing that they shared it together. That would be in the end of them mainly. So the next thing that happens is we see like a scene with Hank at the very end, thinking about his decision on his choices that he's made, on why he chose to save Steve, and why it led to that. So then someone rings him asking about the T. Veronica virus, and Hank says no. He didn't discover anything. So apparently he lies to whoever he's working for, so that nobody knows about it. But, and even though they ask about Steve, because he actually was on Rockford Island at the time, he turns around and says, no, he's declared dead, and I can't find his body anywhere. So that would be his body completely hidden at the time, so nobody actually finds it, because nobody knows where he is. And then eventually we get like another scene. Now Steve is all fine and whatever after that. Claire and Steve have a life together. Now they would have a life together as a couple, which would be completely changed. Meaning Steve would have survived all that, and Steve would have actually took up a job in something. Ooh, nearly got me there. Yeah, so apparently Steve would have actually took up a job, changing it for the better. So Steve would be fighting against Umbrella, since they did it to him in the first place. So Claire would intend to fight along with him again to take on an Umbrella. So that means Steve would have showed up in games due to him surviving, meaning Claire would have dumped her old boyfriends in order to be with Steve. Again, which would have worked with them. Now, Steve would be extremely happy that he gets to spend his life with Claire. So, pretty much that's basically, probably what would happen. And Claire, apparently for, Sherry would have probably made a couple of visits, to Claire, about it. And then, Chris as well probably would have made a couple of visits. Leon as well, checking on Steve, because Steve, was a main focus, so everyone probably had a concern on how Steve is, because Steve was, alone and whatever, and suffering, from drama. So they all told him at a party. So apparently they all hold him a party and such, because they feel bad for him. So, in a way, he, just has, like, a happy life with Claire, so it's different than Lester capturing him. So, years down the line, somebody, sort of gets a bit of blood from Steve, even though Steve's alive, but works undercover to pretend that they're actually good people, but turns out they're just using that blood sample to make something stronger than Steve, to make a better virus, than his, apparently. So Steve would have to fight along with Claire against these monsters and whatever, this new virus and such, especially if it's like fire resistant. You would still have to try, so there's that. So apparently, I think that's what I think at this point. Yeah, I think that's all I have to basically say about the matter. I think, at least I think so. Right, right, right. So, back to, I think I'll talk about the matter of, the new film now, changing my subject, the cast is all wrong, the, thing's all wrong, if only they stayed faithful to the source material. Come on, Mr. X, you piece of shit. Mr. X! Where are you, piece of shit? way he's coming from. I don't know if he's coming from the left side or the right side. Where are you, Mr. X? Oh, there he is. Did I get you? It did. Okay, that means I can run past you. Yay! Actually, go through this door. Mr. X is so funny. Right, okay. Gear. If they did a movie, of like, to do with, getting the characters correct, then they would have to focus on Zero first, then the, first one, then the second one, but above all, I think the third one, I think, could be based around Jill Valentine, I think, since that came first. So apparently that's the way it would go. Zero would be the first game movie. As for the second one, it would have to be, RE1. As for 3, so as for 3, it would have to be well, the other one mainly. So it would have to be based around RE3. And then the fourth film will have to be based around RE2. So it'd be kind of like afterwards. And if they had to space the films out apart, I think one of them would be in between. It could be possibly Outbreak, I think. Or Outbreak just could be its own thing and be like a spin-off TV series, I think. Something like that. Something like this would definitely work. I can't really think of any other things to add to games. I definitely think they should do the RE3 remake again, but better in my opinion. With Dev 1 taking over as the main ones, that could be in charge, I think, of the next RE3 game. So they could get Nemesis right, meaning Nemesis will look better than he did. and it would work. Keeping an eye out. I think you can hear me. Well, apparently I don't really have anything else to say about Games Lara, so, let's see, need this. Right, need the electric thing. Right, back in here. Right, in here. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Do, 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 do.
Sophie get one? Eh?
Right, save. Alright, so, I think I'm gonna, like, end this right here. So, yeah.